Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who suspect that right now they are watching a secret meeting between two officers of the metaphysical police. Each week we spin the wheel and land on a different genre. Spies, mysteries, horror, romance, SF, it's on the shelf. And right now we are reading spy novels.
That's right, Zach. The Looking Glass War by John le Carré, Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton, The Munich Dossier by Charles McCary, The Eye of the Needle by Ken Follett, and Diamonds Are Forever by Ian Fleming.
And this week we have The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton. I'm Zach, and this week I'm really interested in how this one lands right in literary history to where it's straddling the line between a detective novel and an espionage fiction.
I'm Bob, and I'm interested in the future, Zach, on the opposite side. How does this connect to the books that we've been reading? How does it even connect to a few stories in Dangerous Visions? But Zach, what's the history?
Okay, so imagine, if you will, a world of the 1900s. I see this book as taking place at a time when people are really concerned about the anarchist movements that are happening around Europe at the time. So this is like pre-communism, and you get a lot of spy novels happening. So previously in a different spy run, we read Rudyard Kipling's Kim, which was an awesome book. That came out in 1901. And then there's also books like Erskine Childer's The Riddle of the Sands, which is 1903. This book is 1908. So it's really steeped in that early spy fiction world. And one of the very first books we read for this podcast, maybe 150 titles ago, was Joseph Conrad's The Secret Agent. And that came out 1 year before this.
This reminds me a lot of The Secret Agent. We had an agent who can't really do what he's supposed to. He's not a very good agent. And all of the anarchists kind of stand around talking about bombs, showing each other detonators, making plans, and just using people in strange ways. There's no real information they're going after. They just plan some cataclysmic event, just like the book that fell off of my bookshelf. But yeah, what's the parallel, do you think, between this Man Who Was Thursday and Secret Agent?
I think if you were just to hold them side by side, you would say that they're, well, very different. Like Conrad's The Secret Agent is a book that is a little bit more dour, a little bit more pessimistic. And this is very jolly, almost Monty Python-esque. It has a lot of humor, has a lot of wit, and it has a lot of heart to it. And it's deeply concerned with questions of metaphysics and theology, which is something that we'll get to. But I think that if you look at these two books, however, in comparison to these spy novels that come later, you see that they have more in common than I guess you would think. They both feel heavily reliant on detective tropes, moving from one place to another, talking to different people, getting into situations, trying to uncover the conspiracy. And also they both lack the kind of daring, bravado, superhero machismo that you would get in a book like James Bond or like films like Mission Impossible, et cetera, things like that.
There's a totally different tone. You're right. It is kind of Monty Python, but going on for 200 pages. There's this flip-flop of, earlier you said metaphysics or theology. There are weird theories that are proposed throughout, but then they're always reversed. There's a weird structure to many of the sentences in this. For example, Syme is talking to the first officer that he meets. I think it's Gregory. And he says, I can't tell the police you are an anarchist. You can't tell the anarchists I'm a policeman. I can only watch you knowing what you are. You can only watch me knowing what I am. And it goes back and forth like that through many different main concepts. But I like how you've said detectives trying to go in and uncover this conspiracy. How did you feel? It's very different, I guess, from Le Carré, where we have one spy and we kind of know what they are trying to do in their mission. I feel like this is not a mission, it's just uncovering a conspiracy. How did you relate to the spies in this story?
I'm glad you brought in Le Carré because we did just finish Le Carré's The Looking Glass War. And, well, spoilers for both books. What you find at the end of The Looking Glass War is essentially that the conspiracy, the international intrigue that all the people involved dream there of being doesn't actually exist. And I think that this book actually shares a lot with Le Carré in the sense that somewhat pessimistic about, I guess, the possibility of a anarchist international conspiracy, not only by the fact that basically everyone in the anarchist high council is actually an undercover policeman, which is a brilliant conceit. I think it was really fun uncovering that, but also by the fact that it seems really pessimistic about the idea that anarchism could be taken on as a popular idea, as something that the average, lower class individual could identify with.
So these policemen, I think, are quite strange, Zach. They are, every anarchist is an undercover policeman, but I'm left wondering why. Why is Chesterton using spies to do this strange conspiracy story? Why are spies important here in his theology or in his paranoia? I have a quote here where he's talking about the philosophical policeman. They're a special corps of policemen who are also philosophers. And it says what they're doing. The ordinary detective, he says, goes to pothouses to arrest thieves. We go to artistic tea parties to detect pessimists. The ordinary detective discovers from a ledger or a diary that a crime has been committed. We discover from a book of sonnets that a crime will be committed. So why is he using spies? It feels like something kind of strange to do if it's a conspiracy and there's not really any international intrigue and there's no war. Why would he be using spies in this book?
It's a good question. I have to wonder if maybe our conception of what an espionage novel is really influenced by all the works that came after this. 1908 is so early, right? It's so early in the history of this particular genre. So it's a question of why do this? I don't know. Maybe it's a question of what do we see in this book that feels like an early seedling of what will happen later within the genre. I think for me, a lot of it is the disguises, almost no one is who they say they are in this book. In fact, I don't think there's a single character who is who they say they are. There's always an unmasking. There's always the beard is fake, is actually someone else.
I think you're right. There's also tropes that I think become really popular later in movies, especially when they're going into these secret places. There's secret doors. There's passwords for these doors. There's this passage here where it says, "In the inside doorway of the passage gleamed as if it were lined with a network of steel. On a second glance, Symes saw that the glittering pattern was really made up of ranks and ranks of rifles and revolvers." And they keep going and they see bombs and all sorts of these spy gadgets.
Yeah, that was really fun because that was like a criminal underground that was carved out underneath the city, kind of hidden lair of the anarchists, which is something that to me almost prefigures the kind of Bond villain hideaway that's kind of hidden in plain sight. Dr. Evil building a lair in a volcano, but it has his face carved into it like Mount Rushmore. I think with this book, it's almost besides the point to talk about the plot of what happens, because it's such a zany book that it's just one thing to another thing. The real structure of the book is they know they need to catch Sunday. They know they need to stop Sunday, but on the way there, they're going to, I guess you could say, apprehend each of the other top anarchists who are the days of the week. And then as they go and do each of them, they realize that each one of them are police until they finally get to Sunday, who turns out to be God. So to me, the plot isn't really the point of this book. The point of this book is really in the ideas.
It reminds me a lot of Wizard of Oz. We have all of these people coming together who need to come together, the days of the week, or the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, Dorothy, and the Lion. And then they go and they meet something that they don't expect, because these guys, they're going to confront Sunday as they gradually find out we're all police officers. And the only guy that we really, that we're sure is an anarchist, or that we're sure is our enemy, is Sunday. And as they go and they start to compare what they think about Sunday, that's where it got very cloudy in an interesting way as far as what he's trying to do or what it really means for Sunday to be God. Yes, we can associate Sunday with the day of rest. Yes, Sunday can be God. But spies all finding out there's some lie underneath them. And each person, as you said, they're in a disguise, and you find out it's all a lie. And underneath, they have some other intention. I guess, why do all of these intentions try to apprehend God? It's a very different spy book.
Well, it's like a literary rug pull, right? They think they're trying to apprehend the anarchist, but it's almost like he sets up this entire plot just so that he can have this conversation about God, which to me, that was like the disconnect between how we go from one place to another place, because he's not saying anything about anarchism, and he's not really using the plot to say anything about God. What he's doing is he wants to express the idea that the existence of evil in the world does not disprove the idea of divine goodness, because like God takes part in human suffering, which is like specifically the Jesus thing. Jesus suffering on the cross, therefore God also suffers in the world with the rest of us. That's a message that he's trying to give, but it's so, I mean, it's a rug pull. It's a literary left turn. There's no other way to talk about it other than as a message of a book that is completely divorced from the foundation upon which it stands upon. And it's funny because that entire message is really set up in the moment, like it's just with the admission that he's got, and it feels almost worth it just to read the section where that happens. So Sunday says, I am the Sabbath. I am the peace of God. And then what you get after this is each one of those people, who are all the police people in disguise, standing up and kind of raising their objections. You can kind of imagine people standing at the gates of heaven or something, and the angel says, yeah, you can come on in, but before you do, you get one question. Any one question you want, I'll answer. And the first person is the secretary, and he says, I know what you mean, and it is exactly that I cannot forgive you. I know you are contentment, optimism, what do they call the thing, an ultimate reconciliation. Well, I am not reconciled. If you were the man in the dark room, why were you also Sunday, an offense to the sunlight? If you were from the first our Father and our friend, why were you also our greatest enemy? We wept, we fled in terror, the iron entered our souls, and you are the peace of God? Oh, I can forgive God his anger, though it destroyed nations, but I cannot forgive him his peace. So the first person is objecting to the contradiction of it all. And then the next person basically says, I'm just mad that you made me stray a little too close to hell. Like you allowed me to get too far, too close to being bad. And I don't like that. And that's what I'm mad about. And then the next person says, quote, with the absolute simplicity of a child, I wish I knew I was hurt so much. So you have three people who are kind of asking their first question to God.
I think that's very interesting. You know, the one who's complaining about reconciling things, and as you said, it's kind of a rug pull. It's almost like the reader's response to this book, too. It's like, why did you lead me on this wild goose chase if you're just going to pull the rug out from under me anyway? I felt kind of outraged at the same time. Why have I read all of this about spies if it's not really about spies? But it reminds me, because it's almost it's different flavor, different plot, but it's the same story in kind with Faith of Our Fathers by Philip K. Dick, which is where you take a hallucinogen, which is actually an anti-hallucinogen, and then you see reality as it really is. We're living in the future in a society where we're all on these hallucinogenics, and everything seems normal because we are hallucinating normalcy. But there is a God that talks to us through the television and who rules everything. However, the plot is to send in a spy to find out who this God really is, because this person shows up in different shapes. Sometimes this really terrible metal monster, sometimes this bubble. We don't know what it is. We just know it's a monster until the monster itself confesses, I am God. And the only way to defeat me is to believe in me. I feel like this story is quite similar because that is also a spy story. It's a science fiction story, but it's built like a spy story. This is built like a spy story too, where you have to take back that veil of hallucinating, or that veil of the conspiracy. No, none of us are actually anarchists. We're all police officers. And then you finally get some kind of weird answer that you don't really know what to do with. So I still think, why spies? And I don't just think that it's random. I don't think that he just wrote a spy book and gave up and said, no, it's actually a theology book.
Well, what do you think? Why spies?
Why spies? I think something about pretending to be something you're not, and then finding out who you really are, I guess, feels like a similar process to what these three in the group of six do when they go and confront the gates of heaven. And they say, well, what is God really? Because they've all been trying to define him. They don't know he's God yet. They've been trying to define Sunday and describe how they first saw Sunday. And so the way that Syme describes him was like, it was absolutely terrifying. It was as if this giant man, they compare him to a statue all the time, a statue that's was walking toward me and away from me at the same time and staring at me. It was absolutely horrifying. But then after that, after all of that terror, I also felt a kind of sense of calm. So there's something about this two-faced, moving forward, moving back, destructive, well, not destructive, I guess threatening and also promising God that feels like the spy process. You're hoping for something. Le Carré talked about faith. There's something about faith in being a spy, I think, and I think it goes hand in hand in this story.
I think I view it more as a kind of socio-political thing in the sense that like the spy novel is a novel about good versus evil. And it's kind of a artificial construction. You know, the good guys are the home country, the home team. And the evil is, you know, those bad terrorists or God knows what who are trying to disrupt the home team, the home country. But I think what Chesterton's trying to do here on a theological level is explain the existence of evil in a world in which God exists. And I think that the best way to do that is to do a spy novel, is to use characters who, by Chesterton's estimation, reject the notion of good and evil, like true, what he calls like moderns, people who just want to flip the table on all established values. Established values, which in Chesterton's view are maybe not created, but it's certainly passed down by the church. So in this sense, he's able to set up this dichotomy where the protagonist can be these kind of socially conservative, religious type philosopher types against the lawlessness and ambiguity and anxieties of the modern world. And why is it like this? Why is it like this? Well, we find out at the end when we actually have a meeting with God and find out that everything, like even the things that feel like oppositions, are actually, in Chesterton's view, the works of God. And in that sense, this book feels almost like it abandons the idea of talking about social movements or philosophies or different, ideas in the idea marketplace. It feels like it's almost more so about the personal religious journeys of each of the characters involved here.
The personal religious journeys.
Well, I guess I would say like in the sense that it's not a society that through, trying to stop these bomb throwing anarchists is coming to realize that there's that all things happen for a reason, that, God is behind all things, regardless of good or bad. It's all there for a reason. It's one individual person who's saying, why is it that the world is like this when it should be good? You know what I mean? It's like, it's all playing out in one person's head.
But then four people together. So each individual is kind of getting their own experience.
Yeah.
And getting what they need in a way. Again, Wizard of Oz.
It's true.
They get what each needs from God.
I do like the Wizard of Oz as a comparison point because it has so much to do, or rather, it does remind you so much of that moment where the wizard's like, and you get a brain and you get a heart, great. Like the style of ending a book with the kind of God coming down from the sky, the Deus Ex Machina, and being like, everything that was wrong, I am now personally granting you the right. What I want to know is, are you more interested in reading Chesterton after reading this book, or less interested in reading Chesterton?
I'd say still very interested in reading Chesterton. Father Brown was great. Also a wild ride. And I think this was hard to get used to at first, but ultimately a fun book. What about you?
He has a few novels that I've seen the titles of. I don't hear anyone talking about them in the same way that I hear them talking about this book. Father Brown comes out a few years after this one, and it seems like he's gone straight to detective novels after this. So I don't know if there's any more, pseudo espionage thrillers after this, or if this is it. I don't know. I've read a bunch of Chesterton. I love Chesterton. But I think I might enjoy his essays more than I enjoy his fiction at this point. That being said, I would love to blast through some Father Brown with you.
All right, let's read some Father Brown.
I think that next week is going to be, how do I say this, back to earth. We're going to move away from the world of ideas and get back into the kind of hard-nosed, maybe more adventure novel feeling, the more thriller type of espionage. So looking forward to that one with you, Mr. Bob. Talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.